Hello. Today, I have the great pleasure to have been granted this small window of time with someone who's a legend and an icon, certainly a hero for millions of people around the world, and for me personally, inspiring me so much. Someone I think of as Dame Hope, Dr. Jane Goodall. Dr. Goodall basically has spent over 65 years starting from the research work she kind of pioneered in Gombe with chimpanzees, where she allowed us to understand more about the great apes and ourselves, because she made that groundbreaking discovery of not only the creation of tools, but tool use by chimpanzees, changing the way we saw the great apes forever. And then traveling the world for decades, telling us stories, inspiring us about a life lived in nature, making us see what she sees, making us experience what she has experienced in order to get us to make better choices for this world. She has certainly embodied the power of one, what one person can do when they make the right choices. Thank you so much, Jane.
Thank you.
For everything that you've done. And let me say also happy 90th year.
Thank you.
For everything that you've done for us and for helping make this living planet that we all call home a better place. So Jane, I guess the first question I have for you is, if I were to ask you what are sort of three big immediate environment emergencies that we ought to be focusing on, what would you say?
Well, I would say climate change is one, loss of biodiversity is another. Then it's a bit difficult, but possibly there are two, almost equal. One is to alleviate poverty, because poor people will destroy the environment in order to survive. You see it out in the forest. They cut down the trees because they want to make money from charcoal or timber, or they want to make land to grow more food for their growing population. But equally important is industrial agriculture that is destroying our soil with their chemical pesticides and herbicides, making dead oceans in the sea with artificial fertilizer, having a terrible effect on biodiversity. I mean, there are so many other major problems, but maybe those four I would say are among the top. But you can hardly move away from that without talking about unsustainable lifestyles. People who have so much more than they need.
So then what would be your response to people who still, there are people with all of our access to science, to knowledge, to information, there are still many people who deny climate change, who say things like, oh, well, our world has had a lot of carbon in the atmosphere before. What would you say to people who deny that?
Well, sometimes it's almost pointless saying anything, because perfectly well, they know there's a problem. But they're in denial because they want to go on doing what they do. They want to go on making short-term gain at the expense of protecting the future for our children and theirs. But for those of them who genuinely seem not to understand, and it's getting easier and easier, because climate change used to hit mostly the poor countries. Who cares about Bangladesh being flooded? Who cares about Bangladeshi driven from their homes? But now we're seeing worse storms and floods and droughts and fires in the developed countries. And so it's hitting where it matters most, it's hitting the economy. And if people just say, well, this is a natural course of events, you can say to them, well, it may be a natural course of events, but shouldn't we be doing something to try and change that natural course of events? Of course, it's not natural. It's speeded up hugely by human behavior.
Even though a lot of people, use the word biodiversity, and it gets used a lot in a lot of conversations, not everybody seems to understand what it actually means, as in what that word biodiversity means and what biodiversity in itself means for our own survival on this planet.
The first step when you're talking to people who truly don't understand loss of biodiversity, and right at the beginning I kind of fought against that term, because I knew that there would be people who didn't understand it. But the thing is, we are actually part of the natural world. And not only that, we depend on it for food, water, clean air, everything. But what we depend on is healthy ecosystems. And an ecosystem is made up of a complex mix of plants and animals, each one with a role to play, all interconnected. So I like to think of it as a beautiful tapestry. And every time a thread is pulled from the tapestry, which means a species is disappearing from that ecosystem, then, you know, it slightly weakens the tapestry. And if enough threads are pulled, eventually the ecosystem will hang in, the tapestry will hang in tatters. That means the ecosystem has collapsed. And so if people begin to understand what an ecosystem is, and understand that it depends on this mix of plants and animals, then they understand the importance of biodiversity, meaning many different species of plants and animals. That's all it means.
When do you think, in the discourse that we've all had, and you certainly for so many years have been impressing upon the world why it's so important to be connected to nature, to preserve nature, to regenerate nature, when do you think this argument got turned on its head and it became this strange sort of environment versus development kind of argument, where almost like we have to fight for our right for clean air and clean water and all of that?
Well, I think to start at the end, we're at a time when if we don't change that aspect, we will be doomed. I mean, at the moment, I believe there's a window of time when we can at least slow down climate change, slow down loss of biodiversity, begin to address some of the major problems. But we've got to take action now, and fortunately more and more people are beginning to understand, particularly young people. And the great thing about young people is that they influence their parents and their grandparents. So it was back in the late 1980s I discovered many young people, even then, were losing hope. And they were angry, depressed, or just not caring. And when I began talking to them, this was all over the world, late 1980s. Why do you feel like this? Well, you've compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it. So I thought to myself, yes, indeed we've compromised the future of our young people. In fact, we've been stealing it probably since the Industrial Revolution. But there is this window of time. And so that's when I began the Roots and Shoots program, which is humanitarian and environmental. Started with 12 high school students in Tanzania. They were concerned about why wasn't the government doing more about poaching in their national parks? Well, the answer was corruption. Why wasn't something being done about the illegal dynamite fishing, destroying the coral reefs? Corruption. Why weren't people doing something to help the stray dogs and cats instead of throwing stones at them? Education. And things like this. So they were concerned about all kinds of problems. I asked them to get their friends together. We had a meeting of about 30 young people, and we created this program, Roots and Shoots, with the main message: every single one of us makes an impact on the planet every single day, and we get a choice what sort of impact to make. And we decided that every group of Roots and Shoots, because learning about the interconnection of everything, they would choose between them a project to help people, a project to help animals, a project to help the environment, or all three together. And every child didn't have to do the same project, but they had to share what they learned. And that program is now in 70 countries. The last one was in Brazilian Amazon. And it's got members from preschool, not too many, but lots of kindergarten, strong in university, everything in between. They are actually changing the world, changing their parents, the projects. It's all about, discuss the problem, work out solutions, roll up your sleeves, take action.
You've been doing this for so long and you have seen so much. Where do you get your energy from?
Well, I think I was born somebody who was very obstinate. And just because things seem to be going badly makes me more than ever determined, stick out chin and, get in there and do something about it. I can't, but I can galvanize people, inspire people to get to want to help, to make a difference. And the energy, I think, comes partly from up there. I just feel a strong connection with some great spiritual power. So when I get really tired and I have to give a lecture, I sometimes look up and say, you put me on this path, jolly well help me get through this. And it works. It works. So I have this feeling I'm on a mission. And because of that, I just feel I'll get the energy to carry on because I have to. I also get energy from the people in my lectures, because I mean, when you get 10,000 people leaping up to their feet and cheering before I've even opened my mouth, that does give you a lot of energy. And the same at the end. Yes, whether you call it love or whether you call it, fascination. When young children, we try and get them into nature as early as possible. And then they become totally fascinated. They want to learn more. They become more and more interested in how it all works. And they want to save it. And whether you call that love or whatever you call it, it's the same thing. You love something, you want to save it. You understand something and realize how important it is, you want to save it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jane, for giving me this time. And let me just again wish you a very happy 90th year. And in India, we say anyone who's seen 80 years have seen 1,000 moons. And you've certainly seen more than 1,000 moons. So I'm wishing you 1,000 more moons of great health, joy, and happiness. And thank you again for granting me this time.
Okay, thank you.